All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks for those of you who are here in person and those of you who are out there on Zoom. Welcome. We're happy to have you today. This is a training that is the result of meetings that have been going on really over the course of a couple years. The university became concerned about the student experience as a transfer. And so they created a group. It was initially led by Susan Van Zanten, who chaired this transfer task force, to try to figure out where our issues were, we as a university, and what we could do to make that process better and smoother for our transfer students. So we're finally at a stage now where we have some things to roll out, and this is that rollout where we're going to talk about what we're going to do as a process as a university. And I'm probably thinking here, because I've gotten some feedback from yesterday where some people felt like they knew some of what we were talking about, and that could very well be. There are portions of our university that we literally stole from. So for instance, the College of Business may have had a great process that Arts and Sciences became aware of, or this committee became aware of, and we decided we would take parts of that. Or College of Nursing and Health Professions had been doing some things. What we're trying to do is make one process. So any student who comes in goes through the same process. It's more streamlined and we're all on board with that. And that was one of the things that had been lacking in the past. So some of you probably were part of a process that has been working really well. That's great. Not everybody knows about your process. So today we're going to try to take the elements of the best processes, bring those together, and roll that out as an initiative. And for the first time, we have now transfer point people in Arts and Sciences. And that is really critical because Arts and Sciences end up receiving a fair number of our transfer students. They certainly don't all go into the professional colleges. So if I fast forward here, you can see this is the team that has been working most recently. Susan Van Zanten, took on like more jobs like everybody else around here. So when she had to become the title, it's escaping me, where she took over chapel administration and that area too. She asked to move off of this transfer, working group, and I moved on it. And so it's Jennifer Easthope and I out of the provost office that have been working. Jennifer in her role as retention expert. Admissions, we've got Jordan and Carrie, and they're here today, and we'll be talking to you. The registrar's office, Alyssa Darrell and Katie Zampas, work primarily with transfer credits and often send notices to department chairs about articulating those. Information technology, we've got Melanie Trowbridge, who's really our process expert and will help us understand this process and how we're designing it to make it smoother. And then in athletics, Sarah Prush has been behind the efforts there because many of our students transferring in are athletes and they have questions about, will I be eligible? Can I have this major? How will that work out? So that's the group primarily that has been working together. So some of the expectations that we're going to get into, I'm going to go to the next, I want to talk about why we're doing this just a little bit before I go into the expectations. The biggest why, and this is straight from like a Simon Sinek, what's your why? Our why is the students. The students were not always getting a great experience as they attempted to come into Valparaiso University. We want that student experience to be as good as it can be. That's the middle one up here. Make the transfer process easier and consistent for students and faculty. And to do that, we have to accomplish the first one. We have to reduce some of the transfer roadblocks. And truthfully, one of the biggest roadblocks has simply been time. So it takes a long time for students to get the answers to the questions that they have, particularly around, will my credits come in? How will they come in? Will they count for general education requirements? Will they count towards my major? Can I use them toward a minor? Are they electives or do they not count at all? Those questions have taken up a lot of time. So one of the roadblocks, or at least a reduction, maybe a speed bump, would be to reduce that a little bit. And then if we can do the first two things, I think we achieve the last one, which is simply to help increase our transfer student rate and enrollment. It's down this year, and it has been down a little bit, and we would really like to welcome more students into Valparaiso University, so we're hoping to do that if we do this process well. So if I go back, this slide is developed primarily for people who are new at this. So if you have recently been appointed as a transfer point person, these are some of the expectations. One of the first ones is that you would be available and responsive over the summer. Unlike undergraduate enrollment, transfer enrollment picks up around May and is steady through August. So transfer students are continually approaching us and coming in. It isn't one of the cases where it kind of really reduces greatly after May 1st. You will need to know some basic information about academic advising. So if for some reason you have not done much academic advising, please let us know. We'll be happy to sit down one-on-one or help you with any training on academic advising, because the students will expect that you know our requirements, that you're familiar with the requirements in your department, what counts, what doesn't count, what's required, how long it takes, what the sequencing of courses might be, what the prerequisites are for courses in your department, things like that. To respond promptly and decisively, I think I've talked about that. Our new goal is 48-hour turnaround. So if a student is coming to you on a transfer evaluation, we are hoping we can get a turnaround of 48 hours. And we didn't set that arbitrarily. The group has done research now for 2 years about what is expected at other institutions and what kinds of outcomes transfer students receive when they shop around, which we know they do. And what we're hearing is that there's a number of institutions who, when they submit their transcripts, can turn that around in 48 hours and tell them, here's how your courses will come in, here's what will count for your major, for your gen eds, and this is what you would need to do or how many semesters it would take you before you could graduate at this institution. We're trying to be on par with others. The deans are going to evaluate transfer performance. I'm not sure exactly how they're going to do that, but I think what they're going to ask admissions and others are, how are people responding when they're coming? If it's coming to my college, how long did it take? Did that person decide to enroll? Did you hear anything that was negative in their experience when you were in discussion with them? That's the kind of evaluation that'll be going on. And then finally, one point in all of this, another roadblock has simply been that our transfer database has literally thousands of courses that are articulated as UND, which means that they're undistributed credit. They don't help a person progress toward their degree really, other than give them credit. They can't be used in a major, they can't be used in a minor, they're not used for general education requirements. If we can reduce that number, that will help, because then students can see that they can move toward the completion of a degree quicker. So I'm going to ask Carrie or Jordan to come up, or both, maybe they both like, so you can see them and meet them. But they have more information, because this is the team on the ground. This is our admissions staff who work directly with transfer students, hear their stories, and can tell you a little bit more about them. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just had a question about undistributed, because when I get a lot of transcripts, there's a lot of undistributed. If we see something that, obviously just whatever education that I'm responsible for, then should I just come back and say it could be counted for this or something to that effect?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll make the change in the registrar's office, and then it will be either personally on a student's record, or we'll make the change to the database if you believe that it will work for everyone.
Yeah, I didn't know, like.
Any chance you could actually repeat the question, not just the answer?
That's like, maybe we should count it.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So the question on the floor was, if you see a course coming in as UND, but you really think it could count for something, how do you make that happen? And the answer to that is get in contact with Alyssa Darrell or Katie Sampas in the registrar's office, because they will work to change that UND designation to the designation that has a Valpo course number. You need to inform your department chair. Don't just do this on your own if you're not a department chair, because the department chair has been the person we've worked with and who's sort of been the standard bearer for these courses over time. But I can tell you from personal experience, when I resent out a few articulations a couple years ago, department chairs don't always agree, even in the same department. So sometimes it's worth a conversation. So if you see one that you think it could be reevaluated, take it to your department chair and then send it on to the registrar's office if you want to change that designation in our database. Thanks for the question, Selena.
Thanks. So just a little bit about our transfer student population here. For those of you that don't know, we have transfer students that transfer from four-year institutions as well as community colleges. Typically, our community college students are coming from Ivy Tech, the suburbs of Chicago, as well as Michigan. They are admitted into all 5 academic colleges, and even Christ College does have some of our transfer students. It's a little bit more difficult, but Dean Stewart has been really great at making sure that a student can still finish the degree in a reasonable amount of time and incorporate those Christ College courses. Our average student GPA is a 3.4, but we will say that over 90% of our students have over a 3.0. because that is the minimum for a scholarship review. And so most of our students do have over a 3.0. Our minimum is a 2.5 GPA in arts and sciences and business. But again, in between 2.5 and 3.0, we don't really enroll very many students due to the lack of scholarship for that grade point average. And then a minimum GPA for nursing or engineering transfer is a 3.0. We have awesome transfer scholarships. So although by the time you probably will meet with a student, they will know what our scholarships look like. Just for your information, our transfer scholarships that do start at a 3.0 range from $20,000 to $25,000 per year. We offer an additional $1,000 transfer scholarship for Ivy Tech transfers. That's a partnership. And then if the student has an associate's degree or are a member of Phi Theta Kappa, which is the honors society at the community college, they are eligible for one of those $4,000 scholarships as well. The transfer personal visit is the time where most of the faculty or advisors will be meeting the transfer student for the first time. So how the visits are set up is a very friendly approach for the student. They really do enjoy their visits here. The first thing is that they have an hour-long AIA-led tour, and those AIAs cover so much. Imagine how much you can talk about in 1 hour. So they really do focus a lot on the personal information on the student. They get to know them. They answer all sorts of questions on res life, support services, dining, student life, and things like that. And then the really great thing is the tour guides then come back to Jordan or myself and say, hey, you know, I had this great tour. This is what the student's interested in. These are their follow-up questions. So then Jordan and I, if we haven't already admitted the student, we'll talk with them about application information, scholarships, and things like that. If we have already admitted them, we'll talk a lot about those transition processes. So when to deposit, signing up for focus, things like that. Essentially, we'd like to have our students already be admitted when they come for a visit, because that makes it great. We could talk about transfer credit and the plan of study with the advisor in the advisor meeting. Sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's okay. And we'll talk about that a little bit next. And then they also, when they're here, will meet with other people, sometimes like financial aid and student services. But this part is the faculty advisor meeting structure. And so how to prepare. So review the student information. Most of the time the student will be admitted. So you have the student information that Melanie will be talking and Alyssa will be talking about that process today, about getting all of that information. Creating that draft plan of study, which is what Melanie and Alyssa will be talking about. And then if you don't seem to have enough information from those two pieces and from looking at everything in Perceptive, feel free to contact myself or Jordan. Will provide you with any other information that we have on the student. As far as if you already have the transfer articulation, and that would be if the student's admitted, when you're meeting with them, you do have the transfer articulation done. So the things that they want to talk about, obviously the academic program, semester breakdown, completed time to graduation. So that draft plan of study, letting them know, are they going to be here 4 semesters or 5 or 6 or 8, whatever it might be. And then graduation outcomes. So some of your favorite stories from recent alums and things like that. Now, if we don't have the transfer credit, meaning they just decide to come for a visit to campus 2 weeks before and haven't applied yet or haven't decided if they want to apply yet, we'd just like to talk about that program and major. Maybe if they bring an unofficial transcript, take a look at it, you know, kind of reassure them, but we would we would do a lot of that in admissions, but kind of looking at things and saying, okay, I see this might go towards your major. Again, everything being very general when they haven't been admitted, and then talking about graduation outcomes. So as many of you guys have already been doing this, it's great. So for those of you who might be new to the advisor role, however, feel free to talk with, Lissa or other advisors too about how these meetings typically go. And we really appreciate your help with all of it. And so next, we're going to be talking about the process workflow. So Alyssa from a registrar is going to start you guys off.
Sorry, I had a question.
Hello, I'm going to give you just an overview of the process workflow. Melanie and I will be both going more in detail, but this is just the overall workflow. At the very beginning, transcripts are received from admissions or they are sent to athletics or admissions. From there, the courses are entered into the database, either by admissions or the registrar's office. And then from there, some of those courses on the transcripts are not articulated, and so that's when we will send an email out. And I will show you an example email on the next slide of what's all entailed in that email. Some of you may already know exactly what's entailed because you probably get a lot of them from us. So if the courses are not in the database, they're sent to the department contacts. From there, there is a 2-day turnaround or 48 hours to get that back to us. And then once that is completed, there's the Gen Ed articulation or the GEA. This is in place of the statement of equivalency. And then from there, we send that on to the department contact and also to the college liaisons. And once that is completed, there is a folder that will be sent to the department contact that contains the GEA or the Gen Ed articulation, along with the TRER, which contains all of the transfer information, along with any AP, IB scores that the student may have taken. And then there's a 2-day turnaround for the office of the registrar to complete the GEA, and then that gets sent on to the department contacts so they can create a plan of study.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I received numerous of these articulations, and then I never hear anything else. Is the assumption that the student is not interested, or what happens after it's gone through this little portal of stuff?
So once you reply to the email that's sent to you,
Yes.
okay, from there, Katie or I actually enter that information into the transfer database, so we have a record of that. So if another student, for example, comes in with that same course, we know it's already going to be articulated as. So we do put that in to the database, and it also gets updated on the student's academic record as well. For the most part, if they're current students, obviously it goes into their academic record, and hopefully they register for, if it's a new student, hopefully they get registered for courses and attend Valparaiso University.
So if I don't hear anything back, then that means what? That's the part I'm asking.
Oh, that means that we have everything we need and it's going to be updated in the database, the registrar's office. That means we know that this course will be articulated as the course that you decide that it's articulated as.
Alyssa, I think you may be asking, so they're admitted
Yes,
when the articulation goes out.
yes.
I think if I'm correct, you would like to know, do they actually then end up coming to the institution?
Right, what happens to that student and I'd like to say, I don't know if that information is in the database, because I get the same courses over and over again. And I'm like, well, I've articulated, I think, 1,000,000 times that this course does not, but it's still the same one that comes. So I don't know, if that's really how that works. But nonetheless, that was my initial question. My question was, that person, that student from that particular institution, what happens after I've said, here's what that course is?
Okay, it lets the student know what this course will come in as, and it also lets them know, okay, this course is going to be applied to either a Gen Ed or their major or their minor, so they have an idea of what courses they have coming into Valpo. So once they meet with an advisor, they can go over their plan of study at that time to see exactly how long it'll take them to finish a degree here at Valpo.
Right.
Sorry, did that answer?
Maybe up to 50% of the articulations you do not result in a student coming. Okay, is that correct? I mean, it was a pretty high number.
It's pretty, yeah, it is pretty high.
Yeah, which So then I think our only consolation is that it just builds up our transfer database.
Yeah.
So down the line, it's quicker and faster for another student who is questioning whether they want to come in from that place and who's admitted, but we don't know yet whether they'll know.
Do I just click space?
Their arrow keys.
The arrow keys. Oh, okay. Some of you have already seen this, the courses, not in the transfer database, you'll receive this email. This is an example email. Normally you'll see that the title or the subject is the university that it's coming from, along with the course description and how many credits it is. You reply to this email, and then this is when we will update our database with the articulations that you have submitted to us. And
Can I ask a question about?
Yes.
So, do I understand correctly that we have no control over the contents of that message?
we get it from a third party on the course descriptions. And if you need additional information, we can reach out to the student to see if they can get us additional information, or we as a registrar can actually go to maybe the university's website to see if we can get any additional information for you to help you better articulate the course.
Because I would say in my own experience with these messages, that it often will say a number of units. Sometimes we know that's credits, sometimes we don't.
Okay.
Sometimes it's
quarters.
an institution that's on the quarter system as opposed to the semester system. And I feel like in the vast majority of those cases, I have to do a significant amount of extra research to look up, well, what is the curriculum in this department? How does this course fit in with the other courses in the sequence? Confirm that it's on credits as opposed to units and what those credits mean. And I, as a chair, I would rather not have to do that level of research for this. So I'm wondering, is there some way to systematize that, doing that, the extra homework, just to make sure that we have all the information in front of us to make the decision immediately?
Yeah.
Because if I have to do a significant amount of searching through a website, it's the 48-hour turnaround is a different experience than if I have it right there, I can decide on the spot.
This is a system that we've used that has the best course descriptions that we have found for the courses. I would have to look into in regards to the units, if there's a way to state if they're on the quarter system or if they're on the semester system. But I will look into that. And then from there, once we have all the articulations from the transcript for the student, all the transcripts are entered, the registrar's office will complete the general education articulation, the GEA. So we will go through here and update this. And then from here is the plan of study. I don't know, did Melanie, did you want to go over this or? Okay.
Whatever you're.
Then next, once we have the GEA will be sent on to the department contact, which is a plan of study, which is initiated in Perceptive. There will be an email notification sent to the department contact with step-by-step instructions. The email here is just very general. We will have another email that actually goes step-by-step on what is needed. There will be a link to Perceptive to see the GEA, a link to the Google Shared Drive to create a plan of study, and a link to Confluence directions. And Melanie will go into more detail in regards to more detail in regards to the plan of study and how you would actually access all of that information.
Switch up here. So I'll go through these slides and then I'll actually share my screen from my laptop so you can see what this will actually look like in Perceptive. So at this point, so the transcript has come in, the registrar's office has articulated the gen ed credits, asked the departments for any credits that didn't exist in the database, and now within the gen ed, and has created that document. That gets pulled into Perceptive Content, which is the same system that you use for registrar requests and things like that. The difference is we're using it just a little bit differently here. It'll be a very similar experience, just not exactly the same. So right now, when you get a registrar request, it actually takes you, the link takes you directly to the task that's been assigned that has the document there. For this process, you'll actually click into workflow. And then and again, we'll have these all laid out in a Confluence document that'll be linked in the email. And then you'll go into the student academic files drawer is where kind of all of this will live. And the longer range plan is eventually even more student documents will live. This will replace, paper student files and will be accessible, to anyone who needs them across campus. And your individual academic unit or group of units, kind of depending on how the structure is, will have then a subdrawer or an inbox within that drawer. So in this example, I've highlighted biology, and there's the folder that Alyssa mentioned within the biology department. So right now, biology has one pretend student, it's me, and I'm not really going to major in biology, so don't worry, biology. Nothing against biology, I'm just not going to go back to undergrad at this point. So that folder and the icon is a little bit different. So right now, if you open a task, you'll see the icon looks like a piece of paper. They're pretty tiny. This icon looks like a folder. And that's because that folder then contains several documents all related to this student. So it has the copy of the transcript. It has the general education articulation that the Office of the Registrar has created, and potentially the TRER, the transfer report that comes out of colleague. So you'll have all of those as points of reference now when you're working on creating that draft plan of study for the student. Any questions there? Libby.
So is that what we will see if I can't barely read what's the first underlined block when you go under workflow, will we see student?
Right, student academic files is the file. And actually I'll switch now and share my screen.
And this is a new process. So this has never existed, for any college.
Okay.
So that's important to know. Nobody has worked out of this new process where you go into workflow and you can find a drawer where you can literally open that and find these different student records in there. In the past, some people knew how to gain access to, let's say, TRER, but honestly, I didn't know about that until I moved into the dean's office. It's a colleague report. Not all faculty generate college reports, but now that'll all be in there for you. And that particular, the TRER report shows you all the courses that a student transferred in. So it's a transfer record and how they were articulated. So you get the whole layout of everything a student has taken and how it's articulated. It's useful information, particularly when you're designing a plan of study for the student.
And then who will have access to each student, like anybody who has access to workbook?
Anybody, because of the way that we structure advising, where we just have the primary advisor and there may be a second major advisor or a minor advisor, anyone with the role advisor will have access to see that and could see any student. So, and if you don't have the role advisor and for some reason need that access, just let IT know and we can set that up for you so that you have access to it. So this is, the screen I'm sharing now is is perceptive content. And so I'll click in the workflow. And you won't have as many choices here when you go through, but the student academic files is the bottom one. Move the Zoom screen out of the way. And within perceptive, these little tiny carrots kind of on the left expand and open up that field more. And then I'll use biology again. And so now you can see here's my folder. And we'll fix the column heading so that at that point you can see the student name. It should be that way. It should look more like this, so now you can see that within that folder, I have a college transcript and a gen ed articulation. And then I could click on either of these documents. open that up, and this is obviously just a pretend transcript, but I would be able to look at this and go back and look at the other document, and it would be there and accessible for doing this process.
And this is after the student's been admitted?
Yeah, so if you're actually doing the articulation, they've been admitted,
Okay.
right? I'm gonna put a caveat on that though. There might be occasions for athletics. If they are recruiting a student athlete, they might submit a transcript so that they can get an idea for that student athlete of what their time at Valpo might look like. So generally, yes, the student will have been admitted, but you might get these for a student athlete who's not yet been admitted.
Okay, so Slate is for the incoming undergrads, right? And then we use this for admitted transfer students, but then once they've deposited, then we go into DataView.
Right, and if you'll
All right.
indulge me, I'll take a second and explain and do the system overview. So the question for the folks on Zoom was about the systems, the Slate, DataView, and then this process. So Slate is our admissions software and CRM, customer relationship management. So that's the system that has all of the students, undergraduate, graduate transfer, any student who's applying to attend Valpo will be in Slate. And they live in Slate. That is their, what we would call their system of record until they become a student. There's a little bit of a gray area on that because their record gets pulled into Colleague, which Colleague, DataView, DataTel, same, all the same. It's all the same underlying database. Colleague or DataView are just the presentation of the information. DataView is the one that is more faculty and student facing. Colleague is the presentation of the same database that's more operational. But you'll hear people, it took me probably 5 years being here before I was in IT to understand that those were all the same thing. But yeah, Colleague, DataTel, DataView, same. And self-service, which you're gonna start hearing more about. Again, same, yeah.
This is a very specific question, but I mean, since we're talking about the different systems.
Yeah.
One problem that I often encounter for world languages is that the world language requirement is predicated on a student's study in high school. So how many years they studied the language in high school determines what sort of requirement they have. Unfortunately, at least up to this point, if I'm correct on this, admissions does not actually put that information on the Slate. And I don't think it ever gets entered into Colleague. And so I'm often faced with a situation that a person has to contact the student, or I have to ask the student, well, how many years of high school Spanish did you have? And I'm just wondering, is there some way for us to fill that gap in information so that that's part of all these agreements? I can see that right off the bat.
That's a great question.
So could we put high school transcripts in this new folder?
Yeah, that's what I was saying, because I actually just asked the Office of the Registrar if we needed them for any reason. And the Office of the Registrar doesn't need them, but if you need them, we can put them in here for you so you can see them.
But would we even have them, because these are transfer students, so we don't necessarily have high school transcripts.
About half of them submit high school transcripts, so if we would need a high school transcript, we could just request it from them. But yeah, they don't need them if they have more than 24 college transfer credits. They don't need to submit their high school, but we have some that have well over 60 and still submit their high school transcript, so.
This one's a perceptive concept.
So for the Zoom folks, the question was about articulating world language credit from the high school and how might we pull that in a more automated fashion. So I'm going to make a note of that and come back to that one.
You may check your chat.
Yeah.
There's some stuff coming in.
Send me a
Slides.
format that the system admission uses to keep track of inquiries, outreach, admits, deposits. Once they deposit, they get moved to student and a colleague, which is at the point in time of focus.
Right.
When it actually rolls.
When can we have access to Slate?
We're working on that training session right now. In fact, I have an email drafted to work on that.
Okay, so I'll jump back into, so we've got Slate is our admissions database. That's where they live until they become a student. They become a student roundabout focus, that's when they're kind of in a gray area. Focus to the beginning of the semester, they kind of live in both, they're kind of in limbo, so to speak. They have a student record because they register at Focus, obviously, and that requires them to be a student to be able to register for courses. But admissions is still doing a fair amount of the communication with them, and it's kind of that pass off, but it's an extended pass off. So then colleague is the primary system of record. That's where all of the students' academic information lives, their primary demographic information, all of that. Colleague is the primary system of record. Where perceptive content comes in is perceptive is our document retention, document management, and workflow system. The key part of that is document management, at least from a systems perspective. As in, this has the backup information for when we look at in colleague and say, okay, the student changed their major, would be an example, from engineering to business. And we can see that happened in colleague, it has that record. Perceptive content would have the curriculum change document that the student submitted that backs up that change, that says, okay, here is what triggered that change in the system. And so it'll be the same for the transfer credit. The official record of the transfer credit and what applies to what is recorded in colleague. That is the be all end all of what exists. The information that will exist in perceptive content backs that up. It's the documentation of why this is this and how it came to be. Those the three primary systems. I feel like I'm missing one, but those are the ones that are relevant for our conversation today, at least. We're going to talk about Google Shared Drive a little bit, but that's not as primary a system. It's a primary system, but okay, so we've got this. So we've gotten the notification that we need to do this. We've looked at the students' documents, and now to create this draft plan of study, we've created a template, and the template will live in Google Shared Drive, and it's the Academic Advisor Shared Drive. And the difference between a Google Shared Drive versus just if I created the drive and shared it with y'all is that a Google Shared Drive is actually university managed and owned. So if I win the lottery and bail to Tahiti tomorrow, I don't have to worry about sharing that drive and making someone else owner and all of that. So it's just a cleaner on the administrative side of it and accessible. I can set up a group and say this drive is shared with, and in this case, it's the same. Anyone who has the academic advisor role in colleague has access to this shared drive. And then within this drive, there's a transfer articulations and plans of study. And this is where the Office of the Registrar will have created, we're coming back to this, the gen ed articulation. So you'll go into this drive, look for the file for that student, and it'll be titled last name, first name, colleague ID, student ID. So that's how you'll be able to find them. Open that up. You'll have the first tab that has the gen ed articulation from the Office of the Registrar. And then the second tab is, this is your work. This is where you'll do the work. This is the plan of study template. And so this is designed to use to, put a draft together for the student of, okay, here's how your time at Valpo might lay out. Here are the courses that you'll need to complete your major. You don't need to put in everything that they've already finished. This is just, this is the remaining work that you would need to do at Valpo to continue to complete the primary major that they've indicated. And we put draft in bold on quite a few of these because this will be, this is really the tool to give that student, as they're considering their choice, an estimate, a guide of how long it will take them to complete a Valpo. For student athletes, it's particularly important. It will help the athletics department determine their eligibility, if they can choose this particular major, if that will give them enough credits to be eligible, all of that. But also for every student, they kind of want to know, like Carrie said, how long will I need to be here to finish the degree? This does not replace the conversation with you or their academic advisor, if you're the transfer credit and maybe not necessarily their academic advisor. This in no way is intended to replace that. It's just to give you a tool to start the conversation, give admissions and athletics a tool to start that conversation. It's not the be all end all. Yeah.
So when we're advising non-transfer students, we have access to the degree audit. That sort of helps us sort of see the big picture, see what they've already done, where it's been plugged in, and then see all the options that still need to be completed. I'm assuming we don't have that option here. We have to essentially recreate that template ourselves to be able to project what classes they would need.
For now, yes. We are working on a better solution, but I'm not allowed to discuss that yet because we're not sure of time frame. But we are, so this is an interim solution until we can get there. I would think that the degree maps that are out there along with this tool can hopefully be, kind of work in tandem to create that.
But you're gonna, well, someone is gonna fill out the first page with the gen eds, right?
Right.
So we are just really responsible for filling out our requirements for our degree and then fitting in where the missing gen eds would take place.
Exactly. And the question for those of you on Zoom was just clarifying that the gen eds will be presented by the Office of the Registrar, and then the departments will be responsible for filling in any remaining gen eds as well as the major requirements.
And I guess I should say, yesterday the question of minors came up. Right now, that's not a key part of what we need you to do. I mean, this is a document that will continue to live and transform. So as a student, when the student enrolls and actually has a conversation with whoever's going to be a permanent advisor, they may say to that person, I want to add on this minor. And then that person helps them figure out how that fits into the plan of study. But initially, what we need to provide them with is, here's what's left in terms of getting a major, which will take you to a degree, and your general education requirements. And so that's why it's a draft. It's the bare bones, but it gives them enough to know how long it would take them if all they did was complete a major in their general education to get to the required credit amount for whatever degree they're going after. But it will change over time once they're here, as people add in.
And so the operational piece of this is, so once you've completed that and filled this out, and this does, if I scroll down, it goes through, oops, scrolling on the wrong device, goes through, up to 4 years, and you can add in there. You'll click the bright yellow button that says click here to submit the plan of study. And that then will send this document through magic of programmers into Perceptive Content. And so now this document will be added to that folder with the other documents, and it will also send a notification to the transfer admissions team and to athletics if the student is an athlete, and let them know this plan of study is ready now to discuss with the student. And then at that point, you can coordinate with them if you want to meet with the student, if they've already planned a visit, and those kinds of things. But then it lets them know that it's ready to share with the student. Yeah.
Another tiny detail, will this provide information on when that student would intend to begin? Because filling out, each semester, that would be dependent on a certain rotation in classes. So if
Sure.
starting in the spring or not fall of this year, but it's fall of the following year, that would change what courses we would plug in.
Yeah, so the question was if when you're filling this out, if you'll know the term that the student's planning to enter. And that is in Perceptive Content, we do have that as a custom property is the intended entry term for the student. It's not on the first page. And it's on the GEA as well, the start term. So you'll have two places potentially to find that. Back to the slides. Any questions on this before on either the perceptive part or the shared drive? Okay. talked through all of this already. It's there for reference. And then, Lisa, do you want to wrap up or do you? Okay, so that's the gist of our content for today. We've included in the slide contact information for the Office of Admissions. We have Carrie and Jordan who are here today. For the registrar, Alyssa, Daryl, who's here, and Katie Samsis are the primary contacts for individuals for transfer. But if you email registrar@valpo.edu, it gets routed to the appropriate person and for coverage and everything. Similarly with IT, feel free to contact me directly, but it's also best practice to send to help desk at valpo.edu, and then they get it routed, and we can make sure that for coverage that your questions are answered.
Are there any questions in the chat?
We'll check. One of the questions in the chat was, how will we convey to students that this is a draft plan of study? And I think that would be part of the conversation that the admissions team would have and/or athletics, to say that this is kind of a best estimate based on the information that we have, that especially if we're going off of an unofficial transcript, that is dependent on receipt of the final transcript.
Carrie, do you talk with the students once that's part of the close the circle, the follow-up?
Exactly.
Okay.
We'll send an email to each of the students saying, hey, this is ready for you to look at. If you haven't already come to visit, that's where we invite them to campus and say, we're ready, for you to have your faculty advisor meeting, do your tour, meet with us in admissions and all that good stuff. So we definitely explain, we get them from nursing and engineering now. So we do explain to the student when we get them that this is a draft. Yeah, we are very general in our wording because we don't want to guarantee anybody anything, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Carrie was just confirming that the language that the Office of Admissions uses is very general, and they can reiterate that it is a draft plan, and they'll talk more specifically with their advisor when they arrive.
And maybe reiterate that this is a circle. It starts with admissions, who then starts this process, and it ends with admissions.
Yeah, so I guess just following up that this is, it's essentially the process to get the information back to admissions, for the admission process. The benefit of the fact that we can store it and keep it is then we have it for reference when the student arrives and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. But the point of this process at this point is really to get that information back to admissions in as timely a manner as possible, and athletics, so that they can communicate with the student and encourage them to come here so that they can have those richer and more engaging conversations with you about exactly what they want to do.
Are there other questions?
More just a global thing for this process, but I don't recall how many of these sessions are going to be, but are there others scheduled in the future for this presentation?
Not right now. We recorded this one so we could post it, and we ran 2 this week, hoping to catch most of the people who were the new transfer point people and people, excuse me, I'm driving, who do this work in the professional colleges.
Also, Melanie, what we forgot to mention is that we haven't exactly started the process with Perceptive yet. So you will be looking out for an email that will say, hey, you have a student ready to look at.
Right.
So
we anticipate having it, we just did an upgrade to Perceptive content today, so we didn't want to throw a new workflow at it as we were upgrading to. So we anticipate as early as next week, you could start getting these requests. That would be the soonest. But we're trying to get it up and running as soon as possible because May through August, as Lisa mentioned, is kind of prime time for transfer admissions.
right.
So.
And any student that we've already done, we're good. There's nothing to redo or anything on that end, so.
Were you thinking this would be helpful for more people, Tim? Or?
Well, I'm just thinking, I'm here representing my department, but there are advisors in all the other different language sections who are going to need this information because they're not everything is going to come to me, at least. I hope, because I can't advise people in Spanish. I mean, that's not my area.
So the question was about if there will be additional sessions, and also we were confirming when this new process will roll out. We don't have additional sessions scheduled at this point, but this session is being recorded, and I don't want to speak for the rest of the group, but I would certainly, if there's need for additional sessions, I think we could certainly schedule them. We were trying to fit in before the end of the semester, along with all of the other things that we know you're all trying to do now too.
And we do know we need more training sessions for faculty advisors, especially heading into fall, because we're going to be rolling out what Melanie's talked about, self-service, which is a new way students will register, and it changes things a little bit, because in the advisor meeting, students may have already, like a grocery cart, selected courses, but they can't click go until they meet with the advisor. But it's a slightly different format and way to see and view things. But we want to talk about that, as well as these drawers now, where there are information, because once a transfer student comes in, we know that they don't always remain in the same age group. They may go over, and now an advisor needs to know that this information is there and work with it.
And self-service, Alyssa mentioned, is just a new and improved presentation of the data VU information. So it's a new user interface for that same information in Colleague. So it will function similarly. It has actually a much better user interface in my opinion. So it's not we're not changing systems. It's really just but it is a pretty major upgrade. So we'll look different.
And you said this is going to start as early as next week?
Yes.
But only if we have an admitted student in that major. I mean,
So only when AOS, not the students who've already.
Absolutely. So
Okay.
And the clarification right now is that this may start next week, but any students who are already in process, you won't be expected to go back and do those. This will be just be for newly admitted.
With all these myriad of AP and Lottie Blue, their sheets won't be in here. This is just transfers.
Correct.
Transfers and current students who are making changes, right, from what I understand.
So for the moment, this will just be for transfer students bringing credit in. Current Valpo students who are requesting transfer credit to be applied will go through the existing process where they fill out the transfer request form.
And that comes through Perceptive Content?
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
Yeah, and the new self-service actually has a nice little tab that is similar to right now, if I go in as an advisor and put test scores, rather than like degree audit, I put test scores and I can see, you'll have one page you're staring at, and you can just click like, and you can see the test scores, or you can see this, and it's just, you don't have to go in and out, in and out, in and out. It's nice. So the test scores for new students will be in the self-service down the road, but it'll just be a little tab.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
I remember seeing that and being excited.
And there's a screen in DataVU that's SEP, Student Educational Planning. It's on the faculty page, and it should also be visible to advisors that has some of that information as well. So if you haven't been on that, so it's Student Educational Planning. It's the last choice under the faculty menu on DataVU. That might also.
Where you can look at any student that may or may not need your ID.
Yeah, I don't have that access. I don't know.
You should.
My data view is still on. I have to go through all the other things, but not the data view, I have little to nothing.
Everybody has that on the bottom. Yeah, you can access anyone. I'd be shocked if you don't have it, but all of you screen, of course, everyone can.
I go through whatever.
Yeah, watch here and see if this shows up for you.
Should be on the faculty.
Yeah, go to the faculty page.
So if you look here, this student educational planning, this last one down there.
So yeah, you go to faculty, and then your very last thing, student educational planning, allows you to see any students.
I'm almost confident I don't have a student education.
It's a newer field that we turned on. So in the last year.
I'm almost confident I don't have that.
Richard, if you don't, throw in a help desk ticket and we'll make sure you do, because you should. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't do anything in the data view because I don't have any kind of access. I always go through to the colleague or the other.
Okay, yeah.
Someone has done you wrong.
I know, it's okay. It's all right.
I was gonna say,
That's access to that.
follow up with us after. We'll make sure you get it.
That's access to that.
It's 1:57, I know the budget planning meeting starts in 3 minutes.
Yeah, if this wasn't enthralling enough, you can attend the budget meeting next and just, like, way to party on a Wednesday afternoon. Thank you all.
Thanks, Melanie.
Thank you.